What's up, Hype Network? Welcome to episode 39. I'm excited to kick this one off. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
It has been a while. But we have a special guest today. Actually, I'm just going to intro for the first time Pastor Adam as well.
Yes.
Because Pastor Adam, we don't do intros here, but people
We
need
don't.
to know who you
They
are.
do.
They know.
Global
They
lead
do. They need to
pastor, GP at Best Fund. You're
Yes.
a pastorpreneur.
There you go. I
Do you like that term?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
I
mind
forgot
it.
if we hated that term or not.
Did-
but yeah.
I don't remember. No,
Yeah.
I think I'm down with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're down with it. My name's Arun, Koshy. I'm the host of this podcast. And then we have special guest, Johannes.
Johannes.
Also a pastorpreneur.
Yes.
The founder and
actually.
CEO of Coalition for Renewable Gas. But before we get in, you're also part of the Hype Mob.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a
Proud
little bit
member.
more about it? How you feel about it? How's it been part of being the Hype membership?
Love Hype. What an incredible invent and idea.
Yep.
And credit to Pastor Adam and those involved for curating a network of people, especially here in the Silicon Valley, to really come around whatever they're involved in, whether it's faith, energy, VC, tech, or otherwise, but to integrate and assimilate that with faith and to really build something as we build a kingdom tangibly, also in the business place, in the marketplace. So love being a part of that. Have not been able to contribute as much as we'd like to, but working.
What does that mean? What else would you like to contribite? Are you talking about the monthly mentorship? Are you?
I think
you've
I've
been
made
busy, man.
one. Yeah, it's been quite the year.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it that in case this gets
Yeah.
broadcast.
Too much.
Quite the year. I'd love to make the prayer calls. I'd love
Yeah.
to be able to pray with
Yeah, they're great.
startup entrepreneurs, established business folks, just cross-pollinate faith
Yes.
in different spheres of influence.
I love that that's your desire, because it is definitely one of the aspects of going just from the Hype Network to the Hype membership is that unlock of people that are, in many ways, and knowing kind of what you've navigated this year, people who've navigated something similar, and whether they're encouragement to you or you're an encouragement to them. What you find when you're founding a company or you're, an entrepreneur, you find that you are exposed to unique situations that you're never prepared for. But a network like Hype Mob realizes, man, there's someone who's navigated this before. And then it becomes someone who can give you keys or steps to get through it. And it's not just coming from, necessarily myself or Vance, but just across pollinating within the network. And
It's a hack.
It is a hack.
It's a cheat code. It's an incubator. It's kind of all these. It's a combinator of sorts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's unique because I'm not aware of anything like it in the faith space.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So I look forward to rolling our sleeves up as time allows. And
Let's
really
go.
Not just being a consumer, but being a contributor. Right?
I like that.
Pastor Adam, do you have anything that you'd like to share from like the Hype membership? Any highlights that recently?
From the Hype membership,
Yeah.
I don't think we've even spoken since we did the Frankfurt Hype session
yeah.
and the London Hype session just recently, and very excited because we've got coming up at the end of this year, we're going to run it back in London. We're going to run it back in Frankfurt. And when are we broadcasting this session?
This will be. It depends what we talk about, but if we discuss certain things, maybe we'll do it before Friday. If we discuss
Well,
other things, maybe Monday.
do you want me to say anything in case we have to edit it out, or do you want me to?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Oh,
I'll figure it out after. Yeah.
And we're going to do a Hype session in Dubai.
Wow.
Let's go.
So
Nice.
it's on, baby.
Exciting.
It's on like Donkey Kong. So that's going to be happening in December 11th in Dubai. It's going to be the 13th.
Wait, this December?
Yep. This December. Oh, but it's just the start. Just
Okay.
the start. This December 13th, 11th, 12th in London, and 13th in Frankfurt.
Yeah, hypenetwork.org. If you want to join in,
Yep.
you don't want to miss it. There's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good content,
So
a lot
much.
of good people that you can connect with. And I can't emphasize that anymore. And like you said, it's a tide that rises all ships, right? So
Ooh, yeah.
you got a lot of smart people in there, so get in there. So Johannes, I don't want to beat around the bush anymore. Let's hear a bit more about what you do.
Yes.
This is going to be a great conversation. We don't get to talk about energy a lot on this podcast, so you're going to be educating us a lot today. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you do in your business.
Yeah, so God has blessed us, and I think maybe to appreciate kind of what we've done to date, maybe some context on how we got where we are, and some of the DNA, spiritual, physical, and otherwise, I think that's contributed to what we'll talk about here momentarily. So I would be remiss if I did not honor my mother, who passed in God's time at 62 years old, far too young as far as I'm concerned.
For sure.
But my mother took a leap of faith and left her home country of Argentina,
Okay.
sold everything that she owned, left everything that was familiar, her faith, family, friends and bought a plane ticket and came to America.
Wow.
Because she wanted her kids to be born here and have chances she knew we would never have there.
Wow.
And when you look at the political mess that is Argentina, and maybe it's finally getting its
There's
act
hope,
together
that's for sure.
now. Yeah. So God only knows, right? But you can't plan those things out.
Oh.
And so I was sort of born with an industrious entrepreneurial gene. I mean, my mom would make 3 square meals from scratch a day, made a lot of our clothes growing up, cut my hair until I went to college, reupholstered our own furniture in the house, just very industrious. My parents were church planters.
Yep.
Some of that was out of necessity. My dad was an architect and an entrepreneur in his own right. So came by that gene naturally. Had a heart for ministry, was filled with the Spirit at a young age of 4 years old, and had a heart towards ministry and felt called to leadership and pastoring. Never thought I would church plant.
Yeah.
And that's because during my parents' church planting journey, they sacrificed everything.
Yep.
And at one point, we literally gave up our home and we moved into an abandoned grocery store.
Well, that's enough to put you off. Church planting.
Right. And I can remember getting the knock on the door,
Right.
the back door of the grocery store, and the county supervisor found out that people were living there, and they said, yeah, it's not zoned for
A
housing.
house.
You can't live here.
Wow.
And so it was actually a blessing. It was an answer to prayer. As kids and my mom, we needed to be out. There
Yeah.
was no privacy. I mean, it was a rough. We
Yeah.
were trying to catch the school bus or get to school without your friends noticing you coming out of an abandoned grocery store. So I think from those humble beginnings, but those humble beginnings being tethered to ministry and church planting, the one thing I kind of said was, I'll never be a church planter. Never say never, right?
Right.
So in ministry, I was always bivocational for that reason. Was like, I have a heart of ministry. I feel called to pastor, not to church plant, but to pastor. But I'm not going to put my family through what I lived through. God always, we make plans, and God sometimes, I think, through his sense of humor, he gets the final say. So long story short, found ourselves employed in the California State Capitol. We were legislative directors, served a number of ranking members on utilities, commerce, environmental safety, toxic material, natural resources, transportation budget committees, and came across a biogas bill one day, a piece of legislation that was making its way through, had been introduced by a prominent member of the state assembly at the time. And there was a political oddity that caught my attention, which was the chair of a prominent committee introduced a bill and then never gave his own bill a hearing in his own committee. And so I found out there were politics involved, and I'll leave the names of all the actors out
Sure.
to protect the guilty. But
Sorry, Newsom.
yeah, this was 2010. Yeah, a little bit before his time, 2010.
Okay.
But I called a friend of mine from the church, dear friend of mine, still friends. I said, Chad, do you know anything about biogas? He said, well, that's funny you ask. He was an energy trader for the local municipal utility, SMUD, where at the time I lived and was a ratepayer for.
Right.
And I said, why is that? He said, we just purchased $300 million worth of biogas.
Whoa.
Like in the last 2 weeks. I said, you have to tell me more. So
In 2 weeks.
so he's coming over, we're having coffee in my living room, and he educates me on all things biogas. Well, I come to find out what biogas is. When any organic material decomposes naturally, it emits a cocktail of what we refer to as biogases, including and primarily methane and CO2.
Right.
So I start looking into this. One of my legislative purviews was energy, and as a subset of that, fallen particularly passionate about renewable energy. And at the time, everything was nuclear. There was some hydro, and then solar was really just peaking.
Right.
Nobody knew what biogas was. So my education began back in 2010 in reaching out to industry stakeholders, the few that I could find. One, they were surprised that anybody noticed, that we were interested enough to follow up, and that we were curious to have another conversation. And what I discovered was that there was no trade association. There was literally no representation for the industry. And for me, it was unconscionable to think that in the 21st century, any industry could hope to exist, much less succeed or thrive, without. Because if you don't, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we can chase rabbits in politics, left, right, straight, wherever you want to go with that. But in my entrepreneurial mind, boom, this was the moment. This was the opportunity. And I can remember deliberating over timing. Do we host an inaugural membership luncheon, introduce the mission, cast the vision? Do we file articles of incorporation with Secretary of State? Do we do that now? Or do we wait 2 weeks, take our summer vacation, come back after summer break, and then do this? And there was some tension around timing. Ultimately, we went with our gut, and I think it's really Spirit guidance. And Holy Spirit prompted, said, get it done now.
Yeah.
And so we did. We
Right.
filed articles of incorporation. July 7th, we hosted our inaugural membership lunch, and I expected 4 or 5 companies to show up that we'd been in conversation with. We had 44 companies show up.
There was that many companies in the space.
There was that many. Well, you have supply chain, right?
Oh,
So
of
you
course,
have there's
of
6 core developers that represent
Yeah.
kind of the space, but then waste is collected, managed, recycled by waste management
Right.
or other
Right.
waste collection. So the engineers, the organized labor, the manufacturers, the law firms that do the contracts for the deals,
So they all show
the end
up.
use customers, they all show up.
They're
Packed
excited.
out the restaurant. We had to buy the restaurant out that
Oh,
day.
yeah.
Out of my personal pocket,
Yeah.
right? My wife and I. And
Yeah.
so, that was, we were all in at that point.
Yeah.
We knew we were onto something. And again, we forecast a 3 to 5 year strategy. We said, if you'll support our vision, we think in 3 to 5 years we can get a law passed in California.
Yeah.
At the time, this is at the time 30-year-old statute, but in 1988 there was a vinyl chloride leak at a hazardous waste landfill in Los Angeles. Vinyl chloride is a known carcinogen, causes reproductive harms, cancers. Huge public outcry, right?
Right.
So in response to the public outcry, then Senator or Assembly Member Tom Hayden, who was married to Jane Fonda at the time, it was a perfect opportunity, right, for a celebrity politician power couple to step up and save the day. And they did by passing legislation in California in 1988 that prohibited the injection of any biogas from any landfill in California's pipeline system.
Right.
So what that did effectively is it forced the biogas industry that existed at the time in California to develop their projects out of California. But then California simultaneously has the most aggressive renewable energy policies and climate change objectives, created market demand that California stakeholders were producing biogas out of state and then selling it back into California,
Right.
which is where SMUD came to buy $300 million of biogas from a landfill in Dallas, Texas.
Wow.
And 80% of that cost was transporting the gas from the landfill in Dallas to Sacramento, California.
80%.
And I'm a ratepayer saying, well, why aren't we using biogas from the
Yeah.
landfill 2 miles from here?
Wow.
He's like, I don't know. I don't think we're allowed to. So that's where I dug up, found the 1988 statute that prohibited this. So the first bill that as a new organization we sought out to fix was that Hayden Amendment. They referred to it as. And we projected it would take us 3 to 5 years to do that with membership support. With God's favor, we rolled our sleeves up. And Assembly Member Mike Gatto introduced Assembly Bill 1900 for us. And Governor Jerry Brown signed it into law in our first year of existence, and that put us on the map.
In the first
Wow.
year.
In our first year of
That's
existence.
You were projecting 3 to 4 years.
3 to 5 years,
And it
yeah.
happened in your first year.
First year.
That's amazing.
The other thing about timing that speaks to he orders our steps, things that you can't plan, right? I talked about that 2-week deliberation. Do we do it now or go to summer break? This was in July of 2011. In that 2-week time frame, had we waited, a prominent law firm in Sacramento that's involved with the industry today sent out an email to their client list and said, hey, we're going to form this biogas alliance.
Oh, wow.
And everyone they reached out to responded, said, we
We'd
just
already-
joined this new group 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
So from the very beginning, and then
So you literally snaked them by
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And then when Governor Brown signed our bill into law, it's the day my mother passed away.
No way.
So it's this poignant reminder of the bittersweet
Wow.
that is, none of this would be possible had she not sacrificed.
Wow.
And then she didn't even get to really fully appreciate what we did and what was happening because she passed prematurely. But God has been so in it from the beginning. I could just recount stories of how God has blessed, provided, expanded, give us influence, access, relationships that,
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So talk to us then about that. That journey was powering along, and you decided, let me just add a church in here.
Yeah, we were literally right.
Why
right.
not?
You're
Let me
right.
start, an association around renewable gas, and full time you're lobbying in Sacramento, and hey, I got a spare few minutes. Let
Well,
me
they
launch
say
a
if you want
church.
to get something done, ask someone who's busy, right? No, I think that goes back to the heart of ministry, and I knew what God's call in my life was, and I've always viewed business and any economic or revenue generation as a source for kingdom funding. And so it was very clear to me, God has given me now the opportunity to step out to effectively own and operate our own business, a nonprofit 501c6 trade association. And that was enough for me to say, okay, God, let's go.
Right.
And so that was a separate journey, Pastor. I mean, I've talked about this a little bit.
Yep.
There was a phase there where had several opportunities to take several churches. One was in Florida, several that we looked at up and down the state of California, and just didn't feel that's where God was calling us. There were places people wanted us to go,
Sure.
but didn't feel this is where we're going. And then we were asked to take a church in West Palm, Florida. And we were literally packed up into moving trucks, and that deal fell apart, and God was in it. People got involved and made it messy, but God worked it for good.
I'm sure.
And so, we were all in, we were vested. And so our prayer became, okay, Lord, if this isn't it, right? I believed it was God's will.
Right.
I think men get in the way, people get in the way, and God's plans are bigger than ours. So he's like, that's not a problem. I can work around that. We'll just do this. And so I said, okay, God, if there isn't, I mentioned I would never be a church planter. Right. I finally got to the place during that about a 2-month season. Okay, God, if there isn't a church that needs a pastor, I know there's cities that need churches.
For sure.
And I'll never forget, I was kneeling at our bedside on a Sunday afternoon.
And you were in Sacramento at this time?
Still in Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah. I was youth pastor there. I was a board member of the church there, had been a member for 14 years. And I'll never forget, clear as day, it was as if in my mind's eye, in prayer, God wrote on a whiteboard, Palo Alto and East Palo Alto.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So long story short, I don't know that I have the skill sets to be a successful church planter. I really believe, Pastor Adam, God called our family to Palo Alto the same year he called you to Palo Alto.
That's right.
Because ultimately he wanted us to connect with you. It just took us 13 years maybe to get here. So what an honor it is to be integrated, as I say, grafted into Vive, and to be a kingdom builder and to buy into your vision. Something I heard someone say one time, I think it was John Maxwell, a mentor of ours, who said, when your vision runs out, tether your dreams to someone else's.
Wow.
And I feel like from a ministry and pastoral standpoint, and then if I may, like, you might have to edit some of this out, Arun.
Yeah.
He won't.
I won't, but yeah, let me know.
I used to refer to myself as a failed church planter or a recovering church planter.
Right.
I think I'm successful on the premise that I was obedient to the call.
Yeah.
We went and we did.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing through a glass darkly. I think I heard the call as plant a church here.
Yeah.
And what if God was trying to say, I have C3 or Vive there in Palo Alto. That's where I want you. But because of the lens that church organizations and denominations and politics put in place, I couldn't hear the voice. I couldn't see clearly. Right.
I hear that.
But the Spirit was getting me here.
Exactly. That could be one way to look at it. Sometimes too, I think God has you on a journey of learning. And when I look at the time that you came into Vive, I didn't know the story. I didn't know the backstory. I just see this incredible family. We got to know each other. Then I heard this story. And the step that you guys stepped in at the right time was, it felt like perfect for you guys as a family, perfect for your kids, but also perfect for Vive. To give us, you stepped into the KB lead team, your experience, and it was like a great acceleration moment for the church. Had you not learnt what you learnt on the coalface of church planting, I don't know if that would have been such an asset, with having a deep understanding. I mean, you're literally on the team now talking about the church plants we're doing and the future and the expansion and all those kinds of things. That really brings an insight from someone who's been there themselves.
Well, to me, it's a redeeming value.
Right.
And I think there's a narrative that there's a thread that runs through the narrative, whether it's our business or ministry, it's redemption.
Right.
Even our secular business, right? What are we doing? We're redeeming society's waste.
Yep.
We're converting
Into
an
energy.
Environmental liability into renewable energy asset. I think you're right. We're successful because we obeyed. We learned. Certainly, I can tell you a lot of what not to do, right?
I can do that too.
But it's also incredibly humbling
Yeah.
to have been asked to be part of the KB lead team, to look at a business plan with you, Chiwa, and others about, okay, as we look towards the vision and X number of churches over the next 10 years, to be able to have one small part in that is incredibly honoring and humbling to me and my family. So.
And so you guys launched out with the church in 2012. You moved from Sacramento.
Yeah.
That was the same time we landed here.
Wow.
And we started in August of 2012. And you guys launched here in August 2012 too, is that right?
September.
Can I ask how you guys met? Like, what's the story? What's the backstory? How'd you guys meet? How'd you guys end up?
First time we met was when you guys started coming to Vive.
I want to say we'd been coming probably 4 or 5 weeks, and then we shook hands.
Yep.
Not because you weren't
came
in the
on a
lobby.
Vision Sunday.
I got to tell you that story. Okay, here's how God works.
Good.
Yes.
Here's how God works. So God had been dealing with us about transitioning from church plant lead pastor. We had a church plant in Palo Alto and in East Palo Alto. We were meeting at the Lucy Stern Community Center here in Palo Alto, at the YMCA in East Palo Alto. And God had been dealing with us about transitioning for some time. And part of that was we didn't have a youth community for our children. My kids Rory was 15 2 years ago. Lincoln was 11.
Yeah.
And as I was a youth pastor for 14 years, I understand the value of having that community of faith. And part of me was wrestling with, in being obedient to the call, I'm willing to sacrifice, but not at the expense of my children and their faith. And I could see some deterioration there, or signs of deterioration, and I wanted to address that. So I knew we had to plug them in to a strong community of faith where there was other young people that they could be around, and God's hands on their life. And so I'll never forget, we had communicated to our church that by the end of 2022 we would be transitioning. We didn't know where yet. We asked them to pray with us. We told them we would let them know where it ended up being. If they wanted to come with us, they could, or they could find somewhere else home. But this was it was time. Sunday morning, I sit up out of bed. It was probably, I don't know, 6:45 Sunday morning, and Holy Spirit said, "You're going to Vive Church today." I'd never been to Vive. I didn't even know it was called Vive. I remembered C3.
Right.
And it's possible I'd seen a billboard and it was somewhere in my recessed memory, but Holy Spirit prompted me and said, "Today you're going to Vive Church." So I told Tanya, I said, "You're running the service today."
Oh,
I'm
you were
going to
still
Vive.
running church?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was like, "You're going to hold it down."
She was like, okay.
Yeah.
She was fine with that?
Right.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
And so
So you came on your own?
grabbed Lincoln. Lincoln,
Okay,
he's
yep,
13
yep,
now.
yep.
He came with me. He's 11.
Yep.
And we show up, and it was Vision Sunday.
2022.
Yeah. And you can't make that stuff up. And the first thing I see when I walk in the front doors of the church, just to the right by the staircase, the 50-year vision letter that's painted as a mural. And I have screenshots from that day that I took to make sure I captured every word. I've shared that I can't tell you how many times with
so
pastors and friends, and it's so inspiring. But it spoke to me because what was evident in that letter, Pastor, is the DNA of the church.
Yes.
The vision. I don't want to be part of just something that's traditional.
Yes.
A traditional church is not going to thrive and be sustainable in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And the DNA that was infused in that letter of influencing different spheres, including politics, which is where I'm in, including energy and music, which is, a family passion. So all those things, I knew it was home. The final sign for me was, okay, will my family buy into this too?
Yeah.
So came for a couple weeks, and then family came with me. And then they came
You
again.
came on your own for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Took a few. Got to be sure.
They had to know I was serious.
Yeah.
Makes me laugh.
A little
So
stealthy.
good.
No,
Yeah.
and I think some of that comes, look, I'm a third generation church planter on my mom's side, and as well as on my dad's side. So, growing up in and around ministry, you're familiar with the underbelly.
You are.
We,
You're like, let me see the cracks.
well, look, and I remember when
Everyone can have a good Sunday.
Right.
But let me see next Sunday.
well, that's why we came for a year and just kind of sat in the back row.
Yeah,
on the
you were
left side.
stealthy.
Well, I really wanted to, Pastor Adam. I knew how big of a commitment this was for our family and for our future.
Yeah.
And you're right. Anyone could look good on Easter Sunday.
Yep.
Anyone can look good for a series. But I wanted to see a life cycle, a year's life cycle. I want to see the low periods in the summer months when no one's here. I want to see when, and the high points as well. And then experiencing Amen Conference the last 2 years. Amazing, right? That's what I wanted,
to see,
the DNA. And then the Spirit filled the Pentecostal traces that are still there.
Can't shake them.
Those are the good parts.
That's right, exactly.
So this is home.
That's so
And
good.
no matter how God blesses us in the future, this is home. We I think, like most people, thought about moving during the pandemic.
The
The
week did.
Yeah, what's that?
The week did.
Yeah. And then we realized, like, no, God's called us here. This is home.
Yeah.
This is where we are.
It means you're strong.
And I wouldn't, mind having homes elsewhere too, but this is home.
Yeah. Tahoe.
This will always be
Yeah, I
home.
would like to stick on that topic of vision, actually, because something that we've talked about a lot is we're speaking to kingdom builders. Like, kingdom builders, what does that look like in the non-church space? Like, how do you bring that to your kind of daily job? And so curious how you brought some of that to the business that you're running now, and what kind of faith steps do you take to make sure that's run the right way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Blessed to be a blessing, I think, is the principle. And something that was ingrained by my parents from a young age was a love for the Word of God. I mean, my grandmother, she passed away 2 years ago at 98.
Wow.
My mom's mom. But she literally would not eat or drink anything in the morning until she'd had her time alone in the Word. And that's convicting. I've compromised, right? I read the word the morning before I eat, but it's with a cup of coffee. So
we say no Bible, no food. No Bible, no breakfast. That's what we ran, remember?
Coffee's not breakfast, right? It's fuel. All right.
I'm safe. Wake up juice.
Yeah.
Yep.
So blessed to be a blessing. And then a love for the word of God. There was, I think, instilled in us just sacrifice is a given. That's who we are. It's what we do. And so tithing isn't a sacrifice. It's simply returning. And so when you live that out and you've seen it lived out for generations, and then you start living in the overflow of that revelation, there is no other way. Prayer is another key guide. I can tell you a story there. I was 4 years old. In Alameda, there's lagoons that you can walk along. And I was in between Sunday services with my parents, was walking. Younger siblings who either weren't born or was sent with family, and there were 2 swans swimming parallel in the lagoon. And just as a 4-year-old curious, I said, "Mom, I want to pet the swans." I didn't know this. Subsequently researched and realized you don't pet swans.
I was going to say I didn't remember anybody petting a swan,
but this is how my mom was, and she said, "Well, if you want to pet the swans, why don't you pray and ask Jesus if he'll bring the swans over here?" Like without hesitation, right? And so it fostered an environment of like, just whatever you need, you bring that to God,
right?
And you ask him without any inhibition. So I did. I closed my eyes and I said, "Jesus, can you bring the swans here so I can pet them?" I opened my eyes. They turned around in the lagoon, swam 50 yards back towards us, walk up out of the lagoon, put their beaks in my hands.
Stop.
And I petted this one. No. And so I've told this story countless times, because if God never answers another prayer, he answered that critical prayer at such a formative age that really framed for me that he hears me as a child. You can't tell me God doesn't hear. He doesn't always answer, and he certainly doesn't always answer the way we want, but he hears. And that's all I need. There's an assurance when you know he hears, and when you know he knows. You can walk with a security and a strength and a confidence that you can't derive from yourself. So I think that's informed who we are, what we do, how we do things. Certainly don't screen I had interviews today we've got 3 new positions open. I don't ask them what their position of faith is, but I mind some of that out by asking questions about ethics and work ethic and character. So we kind of have a 3-step interview process. First step is just me with the founder and CEO, and I'm really trying to ferret out character issues. Second interview, I bring in other technical staff and we drill deep on competencies. And then the third and final is always in person. We're breaking bread together. I got to make sure we have good chemistry.
Oh yeah, chemistry.
Right. You may be amazing on paper, have a killer resume and a work product performance that speaks volumes, but if nobody wants to work with you and you don't get along with others,
it's not going to work.
So we try to infuse that. We try to lead. Servant leadership is big for us. We try to model, lead by example, and it's been quite a year, quite a transition for our industry, for our organization. God's been with us. He's sustained us. And part of our prayer through that, again, going back to early childhood principles of prayer and trust in God, is God protect our personal and professional credibility, our reputation, our resources, and our relationships, and he has.
And it's been successful.
Yeah.
It's doing well.
And we're just getting started.
So what does that look like then? I mean, okay, here we go. We're at Vision Weekend here in Vive, and we've been working really hard on setting a vision. We're catalyzing people to the calling. We're going to try and really push people, and on the other side of the presentation, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a stretch. It's going to be faith. That's what I know in the church space. Talk to us from a business sense. Good. You've got this new industry idea, and you're trying to bring the best and brightest talent in. What's the selling point outside of compensation, which is always competitive, all that kind of stuff? What is the selling point that you pitch as a vision? Talk to founders out there. They've got a vision, they've got an industry, and there's not really that much wiggle room in compensation. Everything's fairly competitive today.
Right.
But it was interesting. I was listening to Vivek. He was talking about back when he was talking and running his companies, he would talk to people who were trying to apply. One of the questions he would ask is, why'd you leave your last company? And never did they say, well, I needed more money or I wasn't getting paid enough. It was, I couldn't do what felt like was in me there. Okay. So it was interesting. Compensation is fairly competitive. What is your appeal or your pitch as a visionary entrepreneur founder in your industry that you see strikes a chord with people?
For us, it's our mission.
Okay, talk
our
about
mission
that.
And our vision. In fact, in the early days when we didn't have any corn in the crib, so to speak, right? When we started, my vision was I would have 6 months just to build membership. Right. So we're in a 501c6 trade association. Our budget's derived by member dues. So I wanted to build that up to create a foundation, a base to build off of. Well, we had policy thrown in our face that just took that luxury away. So we were literally forced to just jump into the fire.
Right.
But as we've grown and as our membership's grown, as our staff's increased, I'm able to almost exclusively pitch membership, for example, around our mission. And I use language like companies join and sustain membership with our organization to provide support for our mission. Now, our mission hasn't changed in 13 years. I think that's a key component too, is consistency. We've been blessed not to have to pivot in that respect. It's been a fight from the beginning. When we first started, it was wind and solar everything, right? And they thought biogas or RNG, which was a new commodity and phrase that we coined, was going to inundate renewable energy markets and eliminate the need for wind and solar. And we said, look, that's not the case. In a circular economy, you need baseload power, right, to compensate for the intermittent production. It's not always sunny. Yeah. The wind isn't always blowing.
Of course.
You've got to have baseload power, and biogas and RNG provides that. And so it complements wind and solar. And then there's hard to electrify sectors, right, like certain homes and buildings and industry and commerce, right? Yeah. So you need gas. So if we're going to use gas, why don't we decarbonize our gas supply and utilize gas from renewable sources, right? So the mission, it comes back to the mission, supporting
sustainability.
Right. And our mission specifically is to advocate for the sustainable development, deployment, and utilization of renewable natural gas. But it's connected with our why. And our why is, you've got to have tangible metrics, right? So the number of production facilities, total volumes of production is important. Those are tangible metrics that allow us to identify, are we actually advancing our mission? But above and beyond that, it's tethered to our why, which is so that not just present, but future generations will have access to domestic renewable fuel, heat, power, and products. And the World Bank estimates that with all of our federal, state government initiatives and programs to reduce, reuse, recycle, and be more energy efficient, organic waste is going to increase 70% by 2050.
Wow.
Population is growing, right? We're eating as much as we ever have.
Of course.
And we haven't perfected recipes for the banana peel, the orange rind, the apple core. We still throw that away, right? And all that organic waste, whether you put it in a landfill, whether you put it in a compost bin, it decomposes.
Of course.
It creates a cocktail of biogases. Our industry captures that, converts that to renewable energy products. So our industry narrative is a sustainable one. I think it epitomizes sustainability. I don't think any other renewable energy sector competes.
Wow.
Right. And I think that's our competitive advantage. So I'm able to point to the mission. And now with 13 years history, I can point to what we've done successfully. Federal, state, provincial, legislative, regulatory change from California to Connecticut, British Columbia to Quebec. And say, hey, in time's on our side, right?
That's amazing.
It was interesting thing. So on the electrification word, Silicon Valley, everyone drives, it used to be a Prius, now it's Tesla, right? Now Rivian, maybe.
Yeah.
No.
The Android of...
It's the Android of the EV world.
It really is.
We just did a video with them where, it's a strange bedfellow sometimes, but it used to be that electric vehicles were the favorite, sort of the political preference of the left, right? And we were working on an electricity program for vehicles where you could take electricity generated from biogas and charge EVs.
Right.
And it looked like all systems were go with the Biden-Harris administration and Elon Musk until he hosted Ron DeSantis on X to announce his presidential candidacy. The same week, EPA goes, And I think it's interesting now that over the last 2.5 months, Elon Musk has been contributing $47 million a month to Trump's campaign. So he's buying something.
Yeah.
If not access, I think he already has that. He's buying. I don't know if it's, hey, don't hammer down on EVs if you're elected in November. I don't know what it is. Right. We have our hunches. We'll see how that plays out. That's a separate conversation. But so
no, it just goes to prove the Biden-Harris flip-flop campaign. That's all.
Well, and Kamala is apparently a gun owner now.
Apparently.
And she's not going to ban fracking. That's good news. I suppose.
What's really interesting, just if I could double tap on something, is your journey into being a founder felt accidental. It wasn't like, you saw a policy.
Well, I was definitely looking for it.
So you were looking.
I would say, because speaking to the sacrifice.
So you were in a zone like, I want to build something. I just don't know what. Okay.
And I didn't know where.
So that's important,
and I
because
didn't
I'm
know
like,
when.
how did you go from, oh, look, here's a bit of legislation,
No.
to being that driven to be that successful? Because I know founders, the drive it takes to build a company isn't accidental.
No, it's
It
not.
has to require an energy and intentionality that you're going to bust through walls. You've had to bust through so many walls, so it makes sense that you were looking for something. It just kind of landed in your lap at the right time.
Yeah, and I'd been working at Nationwide Insurance, and I was having how I even got into capital is a God story.
Right.
I was working in the insurance space,
Right.
and I was having a conversation with our general counsel.
Okay.
And the conversation chased a political rabbit, and out of the blue she goes, "Have you ever thought about getting into politics?" I said, "Well, that's funny you ask." I was exploring a city council race at the time. I ended up deciding not to do that because I care about my family to put them too much to put them through a campaign.
Yeah.
She's like, "But I really think you should get into politics." She's like, "You need to meet my husband." I was like, "Okay." Her name was Julia. I said, "Okay, well, I look forward to meeting Mr. Green." She goes, "Oh no, his name is Kevin Sloat." Well, that still didn't mean anything to me.
Right.
But I subsequently met him and found out, he was the principal of the top 3 lobbying firm in Sacramento.
Wow.
Represents 49ers, Pacific Gas, Electric, Verizon, on and on and on, right? So long story short, I meet him. He's like, "Yeah, Julie's right. She had a good hunch about you. You need to get a job in the Capitol." And so this was all in the same time that I'm exploring a city council run. I decide not to, but then this door opens. These are the parts of the story you can't plan, but when your steps are ordered and you're walking them out by faith, you know he's got your future. And so I was one of 36 applicants for an entry-level position in the Capitol. I elevated pretty quickly over six years in the building. And but I knew God had opened that door for something else, right? And I knew pretty early on I was not interested in running for elected politics. People often say in our industry and outside, "Oh, Johannes is a great politician," and it's kind of an offense, to be honest with
really?
you. It's like, and I'm very quick to say, no, I'm not a politician. I work with politicians.
Right.
I know how to be diplomatic, and I have political access, and we know how to leverage that. But no, so. And part of that is really back to the ministry heart, right?
Yeah.
Because I think in an elected position, in a best case scenario, you're going to make half the people happy, and then you're going to lose credibility and influence with the other half. And when the gospel is your mission,
For
first
sure.
and foremost, it's not worth
No.
the politics.
Right.
It's,
Let me ask this question, okay? Sorry, Arun.
No, it's okay.
I know you got a question.
No,
I can
go,
feel
go.
it, but
No,
I
no,
could
no.
ask this question
Yeah, for
because
sure.
you've gone from politics, working with bureaucrats, working with the bureaucracy of wasted time, wasted money, taking so long, and then a startup where everything is efficiency, everything is quick. How would you, if you're looking now, knowing what you've done, building a company, everything's efficiency, everything's streamlined, quick, all that kind of stuff, how would you apply that mentality to the bureaucracy of government?
Government has figured out how to thrive on its own dysfunction.
Yeah.
It only functions because of its dysfunction.
Interesting.
Right? It's a built-in checks. I think it started out as built-in checks and balances that now is just so out of whack and out of touch with reality that there's almost no real expectation for change. Right? And you look at the things, even in the current presidential campaign, right? The things that one side saying is what the other side was just saying 6 months ago. We're questioning Biden's senility 3 months ago, and now they're flipping it and questioning whether Trump's
You don't get
lucid.
to do that.
Yeah,
You don't
right.
get to do
I
that.
mean, but that's like
Yeah.
the word. It was like, okay, you tipped. That was a tell. You tipped your
It was
hand
a
when you
tell.
used
Right.
that one, right?
Right.
Like,
That's definitely a tell.
so there's, it's an echo chamber too sometimes. So, what we tell our members, our industry is, look, we cannot guarantee outcomes, but we can guarantee access and process.
Right.
And we can promise that we'll do our due diligence.
Yeah.
We're going to advance our mission.
Yeah.
And time's on our side, fortunately, back on the business side. So I think being able to have a mission that is rock solid, that can stand the test of time, standing by that, delivering on that even incrementally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How were you able to do it in the first year? I mean, in a year, you were able to make such big change. What do you think was the key for you to be able to do that with the government?
Had to be the Jane Fonda moment, right? Yeah.
No, that was years before.
Oh,
that was
was years
1988.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So we came on the scene. So to give you industry context, the very first biogas facility in North America was built in 1982. I was one. Okay, so I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
The industry existed, and when we came along and founded the organization in 2011, 30 years later, only 30 additional facilities had been constructed. So that's like one project per year over 3 decades.
Right.
Which explains why no one knew what biogas was in North America. Now you go to Europe, they're 30 years ahead of us. They've nearly perfected the circular economy, nuclear, wind, solar, biogas, hydrogen. And then you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There's a cautionary tale there, and how EU has had to pivot away from natural gas, which now their supplies are cut off, to biogas. Right? You think that would be instructive for our governments to say, hey, maybe we should do something about our dependence on foreign oil.
Right.
And maybe we should really utilize the
You would think
natural
so.
gas and renewable resource. Right. And that's another interesting rabbit to chase, though. It's really not about energy.
Right.
Oh,
It's about geopolitical positioning.
Yeah,
hello
definitely.
for the listeners out there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, think about it. Like I remember the
Like if
industry
it was about
thinking-
energy, there's solutions.
Well, and if it was about energy, then we would have divested under Biden.
Yes.
Right. Right.
But dependence on natural gas has gone up 2% every year under the Biden administration compared to Trump.
Wow.
Because it's not about actually. And think about it this way, from a practical, political, and economic. If we forfeit the one economic lever we have in the Middle East and we stop buying oil,
Yeah.
I mean, they don't listen to us anyway under the current administration.
Sure.
But they're definitely not going to listen if we're not putting money in their
Right,
pocket.
right,
No, that's
So, I think that's just a practical reality.
Yeah.
So I give our team, our industry context, like, hey, this is what's happening on a macro level. This isn't going to change much. Time's on our side. We're doing the right thing. We're solving a waste management problem. We're turning one man's trash into another man's treasure.
Yeah.
Right? We're converting a societal liability into environmental and energy asset. Time's on our side. And sure enough, the general public picks up. And we have 16 universities that are members of our organization. So we have the chance to speak to the next generation of leaders that are in school now, and they get it. They see past all the propaganda, and they recognize, like, yeah, we have to do something with the energy that's
And what
right
does
in front of us.
what does that translate into cost per kilowatt?
Oh, that's just too technical. I'm on the political and policy side, so I don't have it per kilowatt. We think in MMBTUs,
Okay.
or ethanol gallon equivalents. So I know you're an electrician, so you might be thinking, I could do the conversion. I can get the conversion for you. I don't have it top of mind.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think, like, okay, is there an argument against this form of renewable energy?
So
Is it expense? Is what I'm trying to find.
what I
Like, is
thought.
there?
It is
there-
expensive.
Okay.
There's a premium with every renewable energy.
Right.
Solar was expensive too until
Because
the
what
cost
you're
of
what you're
Right.
preparing for us is like, well, this makes sense. Hey, we're taking waste, we're turning
Right.
it into renewable energy. All right. So is it the process that makes the expense so much?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a
So-
process that's connecting the gas product with the existing energy infrastructure.
right.
For example, in California, we have prevailing wages,
Yep.
right? To interconnect a production facility with a pipeline, let's say it's a mile away from the production site, it could be $5 or $7 million,
Right.
just to interconnect.
Wow.
The same mile of pipe in Missouri might be $250,000.
Oh wow. Okay.
So and for that reason, we're working with utilities.
It's
and
like the
exploring
high-speed rail in
legislation.
California.
Yeah. That's
100%.
Yeah.
It can be done. It's being done elsewhere. Why aren't we doing it here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we take a step back and I want to talk about the problem that you're trying to solve? Because it seems very obvious, maybe to me, that we need this, but it's obviously policy and a lot of other things that are slowing it down. So what are the problems that renewable gas or other forms of energy are trying to solve? And like, what's the core?
The only opposition we really have now is from people who are anti-combustion of fuels, whether they're biofuels or otherwise. There's a special interest that want to get rid of all gas. They want to strand our existing natural gas pipeline and oil pipeline infrastructure, and they want to electrify everything. But it's short-sighted. It's misinformed. You have to consider, okay, in that scenario, where does the electricity come from?
They've
Right.
never been to a coal plant?
Well, my Tesla has no tailpipe emissions. Yeah, but
Yeah, but the coal plant does.
the coal plant does. And what child labor mined the rare lithium and cobalt to
Right.
create the battery? And then what's the battery life? And then what do you do with the battery when it dies? And where's it deposited? Right? Exactly. There's emissions at that power plant, and that's impacting disproportionately disadvantaged communities.
Yeah.
So it's NIMBYism, right? People look in their backyard, and that's all they care about.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're a little more thoughtful and intentional. We dig a little deeper than that,
Yeah.
and realize that, look, you can be anti-petroleum, but how about those rubber-soled shoes you're wearing, right? You're going to give up shoes and just
Yeah.
go barefoot, right? I mean, so it's a deeper conversation, and we love having those conversations. And
I
when-
bet you do.
yeah,
I bet you do. Educational.
the time's on our side,
conversations.
right? Time's on
Right.
our side.
For sure, yeah, yeah. I think like that's the I don't know what we're gonna call it. Is it a narcissism? Is it the same people that I see boycotting, on the left about certain things, when you actually ask them to live like they are boycotting,
Right.
Whether it's pro-Palestine, whatever the scenario is that they're pushing, it seems to be a left agenda. It's always based in misinformed or uninformed people who just take a headline or a think tank or a echo chamber, and they are so quick to. It's crazy to me how people can be so quick to spout something they have no background knowledge or even haven't looked into.
Yeah.
And I like to follow a lot of different Instagram pages where you get someone just going, "Hey, what do we believe?" And they're like, "I don't know. my friend told me
Right.
we're rallying together." You know, so it tells me that people want to be activists they just don't know what to activate, like what they're activists for.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this passion to do something, but anything.
And
Right.
everyone has a voice because of social media.
Right, right.
And it's
Sure.
created this cacophony
Right.
of noise
Yes.
that
Yeah.
really
Yes.
says nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
You
And it
can-
gives you a way to kind of grab on, like you said, to the headline. So there's a lot of groupthink without a lot of substance.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that will say, you know, like, oh, we don't want like nuclear energy. It's very dangerous. But like, there's a lot of facts and a lot of advancements in this space that have kind of led to it's actually safer now. It can actually produce more energy. Maybe
Yes.
something. But there's a lot of headlines that are out there that say, obviously we don't want this. You know, nuclear waste is very dangerous. But like, if you have to dug into it, maybe you
Yes.
could look into this. And one thing I want to ask you is that with how like much of our policy and our government is so slow to act, we're actually falling behind in like the global scale. Can you talk about a little bit where you see that?
Yeah, it's a problem. You know, there's nothing like legislators or regulators in search of a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, right? And you know, even climate change, right? Look how the narrative has changed from global warming to before that, back in the 70s, global cooling, right?
Right. Exactly.
Then global warming. Well, now let's call it global climate change. That gives us maximum flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't mean to speak disparaging because I do think that
Oh, don't
probably
worry.
No, leave that to me.
We have a segment today. We can do
I
it.
think that human beings probably are impacting the environment. I think there's evidence of that. We could argue the merits. I always point to, from a faith standpoint, Book of Revelation, which says that the earth is going to melt with a fervent heat.
Yeah.
It just doesn't say why or how.
Yeah.
So maybe that's climate change. You know.
It could be. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, there is definitely an impact humans make on the earth. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there is a balance between being diligently stewarding the earth, not being wasteful. You know, the first mandate for man was to tend the garden.
Right.
Okay, so there is a mandate order there for us to care for what we do. At the same time, my frustration with the climate narrative and the global warming narrative or the climate change narrative is the climate changing? Yes. Are we predicting because we've got such small readings that, you know, the end is near? Or is it a cycle, a 100-year cycle? I know weather comes in patterns, so we haven't been recording weather long enough to know how long the cycle. Are we in a 1,000-year cycle? All these different things. All that aside, okay, we could argue that all day long. Yes, we agree that climate is changing. Yes, we agree humans have an impact on it. But it's the monetization by politicians that I have the issue with, where we can just pull on people's heartstrings, get carbon payments, all these things, manipulate whole industries at that cost, and everyone just goes along with it with no one asking the question, hey, what does that change?
Right.
What does me paying a carbon fee change?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you haven't actually pushed them to reduce their
Right.
emissions.
Well, now there's extreme environmentalists that are pushing against the whole offset scheme.
Right. Because it just goes, oh, I can pay money? Okay,
Right.
great.
Right.
But I don't have to change anything.
Correct.
So there's politicians and politics, that, governments that got wealthy by pushing this. So of course they're going to push this like a religious thing. And it just gave people an opportunity to spend money to not have to change anything. That's my point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think on that, I mean, it's kind of what you guys have been talking about, but it feels like government is not about change. It's just about topics and ideas.
Well, some governments can be about change.
Let's talk about which government, like our governments?
No, well, depends who gets in.
Right, yes.
You know,
yeah.
we got, what are we, 14 days away?
Yeah, big time for
It's
everybody.
pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It was, you know, I think for me, I'm really excited about the potential of what it would look like with a new regime in, specifically with the team of Elon. You've got Vivek. Something that Elon said I thought was really fascinating because, you know, he's getting a lot of heat about saying that, you know, they're going to, I think, take at least 75% of government and
cut it, right?
you know, cut it.
Yeah. The Twitter model.
What did Trump
Yeah,
say?
yeah,
He was
yeah.
going to be the czar of scissor cuts
Yes,
or something like
that's
that.
right.
Something like that.
But you know, one of the things they said is, you know, for instance, they'll get heat over the you know, Department of Education. They're going to cut
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and people are like, whoa, how's public schools going to, you know, get funding and all that kind of stuff? Well, what their solution is, I thought was brilliant, is instead of having departments, have task forces, because task forces have an end date once they achieve their task. Departments, once they fulfill their mission, they just keep existing.
Right.
So that just becomes this big quagmire, this swamp
Yep.
of people who are just you never fire anyone in politics, you only add.
Yeah.
And so for years, it's like 4 million bureaucrats that are now on the payroll that are unelected officials.
Well, you look at all the jobs that were supposedly created over the last
Yeah.
period. And most of those are government jobs.
Government jobs.
Yeah.
We're creating over-dependence on the government.
Right.
And just running debt.
And the swamp loves that, right?
Yeah.
The swamp loves it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And like you
The
said,
swamp's on both sides,
Yeah.
100%.
Is it?
I,
Sure.
I
Of
know,
course it
right?
is. Of
Yeah.
course it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just adds to the dysfunction, right? And like you said, this is kind of what they want, right? Just they operate in this area of
Yep.
dysfunction. You have all these people, just layers on layers. Everything just continues to move slower.
Yes.
But how practical do you think it is? The idea is great.
I think it requires what I think it requires is when let's just forecast Trump takes presidency.
Yeah.
I would say the pressure is just to keep the same system but just make it Republican. Because there is so much pressure on day one to get things done. If you're going to go in and change the whole infrastructure, that means it's going to put a delay on what you can get done. Maybe even half of your term will be spent on restructuring government before you actually get anything done. And so the question is, are you prepared to do that? Are you prepared to spend half of your presidency, your elected cycle, on just restructuring, reordering, fixing, removing, all those kinds of things before you can get productive? Because everyone can see, I've got a limited term, I need to make this term maxed out. My only thought is, Trump only has one more term.
Right.
And so you might as well use it because you're not going for re-election.
Right.
Might as well use it to restructure. It's like I think it's like the perfect scenario for a restructure of government.
Yeah.
I think J.D. Vance is our president in 4 years either
Yeah.
way.
That's what everybody's saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really impressed on the vice presidential debate, just his approachability.
The conversation with Martha Raddatz was amazing.
I gotta watch this. I think
Oh, you got to watch that
I
one.
haven't seen that
That's the classic one that's gone viral where she's like, but there's only, talking about the Springfield, Ohio, like the gangs that were coming in taking over
jobs and
taking
eating
over
pets.
apartment complexes.
Oh, right.
And she said, it's proven it's only a handful. And he's like, Martha, can you understand what you're saying right now? You're
admitting there's
justifying
some.
only a handful.
Right.
Anything more than zero is too many.
Right.
And it was just like, it went viral, went crazy.
What else were we talking about on the politics side? You want to inform us on any of the politics or the policies that we should be looking out for as we get close to the time to vote? In your space?
There's the low carbon fuel standard program in California,
Okay.
which requires, in a sense, basically decarbonization of our fuel supply.
Oh, this is affecting everything. Like this is even, I think, is this the policy that's even affecting? Because I went to buy a new leaf blower, and the guy was like, "Hey, I'm just telling you right now, you want to buy the gas one because you're not going to be able to buy them in California in a couple of weeks' time."
Really?
Well, that was an executive order, I believe, from Gavin Newsom a year or two
Everything's
ago.
battery powered now.
Oh, wow.
On your leaf blowers, your weed whackers, everything is no gas.
Wow.
So you have to go out of state to buy them.
Well,
and the energy output, the horsepower is not matching at all.
Well, and we're supposed to be like 100% electric vehicles by 2035,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah.
So people are just going to go to Nevada, buy cars, and drive them
Drive
over and pay the penalty.
Exactly. Probably. Yeah.
So
what's this carbon?
low carbon fuel standard,
Yes, low carbon fuel standard.
which provides economic incentive for developers to invest, build these biofuel facilities, not just renewable natural gas, but ethanol, biodiesel,
Okay.
to decarbonize the fuel that we use. So like if you go to the gas station, you can see depending on the type of fuel, it'll tell you, the split between, the gas composition. And the oil companies don't like it, right?
Right.
They want straight gasoline. And there's this war over how much it's actually going to impact gas prices at the pump. Regulators say between 8 to 10%.
Wow.
Or I'm sorry, 8 to 10 cents
Oh,
per
okay.
gallon. Sorry, versus 47 cents, which is what the oil lobby is suggesting.
Right.
So, it's probably closer to 8 to 10 cents. But the reality is, the oil companies are still subsidized by our federal government.
Of course.
They're making billions of dollars, and they're still subsidized. So
That's crazy.
The irony there is they actually don't have to pass any of those costs on to the consumer.
Oh, so they're just going to make more money.
Right, but poor us, right?
Of course.
But I will say California is known for its regulation. Some have suggested its greatest exports are regulations.
Regulations on regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what does the carbon do? How do you take carbon out? And if you can take carbon out, why haven't they been taking carbon out?
So there's been, for a long time, a political push to sequester carbon, right?
Right.
Carbon, and that's another scientific debate, right? There's carbon that exists in the atmosphere. Some would suggest the atmosphere needs
is this that
carbon.
argument where, you know, they tried to decarbonize fuel in ships going across the Pacific or the ocean, but then they realized it didn't create cloud cover, so now it's heating the water, and that's what's causing the hurricanes.
No,
I hadn't
You didn't
heard
hear
that.
about this?
No, I didn't hear about
All right, so there was
Educate
this
us.
this rule that went out, and it was to decarbonize the fuel in ships because they were putting out, they're pumping, like, you know, you see the ship tugging across the ocean, you know, with all these cases on there and all that kind of stuff, and just this smoke coming out, and it was like polluting the air. So they had to decarbonize it, so then it stopped actually creating a fog layer, which now heated up the ocean, which created this energy. That's why we're seeing so many natural hurricanes and disasters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so they're like, put the carbon back in, you know, that kind of like.
Interesting.
I don't know.
We'll
I don't
fact
know.
check this for the next
Please
pod.
fact
Yeah,
check it.
yeah,
'cause
that's interesting.
it's on
I've
one of my
never heard
Reddit
that.
feeds, probably.
All right, well, this is a great conversation about politics, about energy. But one thing before we let you go was talking about leadership. You have a big passion for leadership, for educating people on leadership. You have this thing called the 7 Fs. I wonder if you can tell the audience a little bit about that. And I want to talk about, your faith, family, and all that.
Yeah, I think the 7 Fs is kind of an alliteration, an illustration. I call it the 7F flower. And at
that's
some
nice.
point,
I like that.
Yeah, at some point did this kind of Venn diagram kind of thing where
right.
you overlap things you're passionate about, things that can be profitable, and things there's market demand for. And it was in a season where I was trying to identify, okay, what are the different threads that make up the fabric of what I'm really passionate about? And I kind of came up with 7 things. 7's a favorite number. 7's a number of completion or perfection. And so, you know, and then of course, as a preacher, right, always fond of alliteration. So,
Make it sticky.
Yeah. So it's faith, family, friends, finance, food, fitness, and fashion. Not always necessarily in that order. So yeah, those are kind of
And
the
no
areas
fun.
that.
No.
Well, no. So it's kind of funny, you know. It was
The 8F.
if you have faith, family, friends, and finance, you can have.
You
fun.
have fun. There you go.
It's in there.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah. So how do you balance the two? Because I've asked you this. Family is a big thing for Pastor Adam. We talked about it on one of our podcasts. The last thing, legacy for you came to your family. How do you balance the two with your business? Even when you're church planning, the one thing I hear about church planning, the pastor's kids are always the ones that take it the hardest. You know, how do you balance that? How do you balance family, church, and? I
think drawing from my experience growing up, as hard as some of it was, nothing we went through ever caused me to question God. I look at maybe choices my parents made that weren't maybe in the best interest of their marriage or as parents of us as children, but never questioned faith. So faith has always been a bedrock. And then there was a lot of good examples of what not to do. I heard someone say, you know, the best thing a father can do for his children is love their mother.
Yeah.
So that stuck with me. I had a professor in Bible school tell me one time, this is on the fitness side, he's like, take care of the old man you're becoming. He said, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. And I look back now, and he was like 45 at the time. And I'm thinking, that's me now.
Yes.
So, you know, but back to your question, Arun, like I think integrating family into the call, it's the work when it's the work of the Lord. It's I love what you said. I think on the August 2nd podcast, like after Frankfurt's launch, you're going to be exhausted, but we're winning. Right. Like, both boxers, you said, were exhausted, but the one who wins, right? And so I think there's a sense of fulfillment that comes when you've expended energy in a victorious cause. So I think integrating our family, could not have started the business without my wife's support, without my sister's support. She's creative and director of all of our events and member experiences.
Is she still working with you today?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
13
good.
years later.
Wow.
Yeah. And our kids always put the swag bags together, our VIP bags at our
That's
annual
so
conference.
good.
So they have memories when they're 2-3 years old, putting the wine bottles in the thing. So I think that's one way is when I was young, unfortunately, my father did make time to spend with me on a personal level. I can tell you many times I said, hey, will you come throw the ball with me? And he was too busy. When I was preparing for a sermon or something for work, it didn't matter. So I would throw the ball against the trunk of the tree, and that's how I became a decent infielder at one point. So I've made it a point whenever
he
my
helped
kids,
you.
yeah, exactly.
How you grit.
And I heard someone say, if you'll get involved and you're interested in what your kids are interested in, they'll be interested in what you're interested in.
Totally.
Interesting.
Totally.
And so, like, I've also tried to flip that and get them involved in what I'm doing. and then they want to play golf with me.
Yes.
And Dad, why can't we go on this trip? And well, because it's an adult, it's a guy's trip, right?
Yeah.
Or it's a brotherhood thing, or it's whatever. Like, but they want to be there.
Yeah.
But it's also because I've spent time and I coached their little league and I'm at their games. Tanya and I, we've got to divide and conquer. It's zone defense when you got 3 kids and 2 parents, right? But one of us is at everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that makes a difference. Lincoln was asked to serve Friday Vision Gala.
Let's go.
I love that. I'm
Wow.
like, love
He
that.
gets to be in
You
the
know?
room.
Yeah, he's
That's
on the Vox
special.
Gen team now. So like, love seeing that. Rory was just getting to music, and then we had to move her off to college a couple weeks ago, but she'll be back.
Yes.
And so I think just as you've modeled, Pastor Adam, to just integrating your family into the kingdom.
Yes.
Seek first the kingdom and His righteousness. All the things are added, and then they want to be part of the additive too.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit more, Pastor Adam? Because you obviously you set the example for doing that.
Yeah.
But that's not easy. I mean, I've seen obviously the other side of it where the kids don't want to be any part of that, right? And so how did you do it? How did you guys both balance that and like getting the kids interested in that side of
Yeah, I think what Johannes just said was really key. You know, the idea that if you're interested in what your kids are interested in, and then they'll be interested in what you're interested in, you have to be the initiator. I think if you see kids as a distraction from what you're doing, or like they're getting in the way, or oh man, I have to spend time with them so I can get back to what I'm doing, you're going to miss it. They're the main thing.
Yeah.
Your work is the distraction from being around them. Now it's a necessity, but they have to be your first ministry. And if that's not paramount and at the forefront of your vision, there is no way to add kids on or add family in. Family comes first. It has to come first. Yeah. Everything else is subsidiary to that.
Right.
Okay. And so even when we were moving here, we planted a church as a family. My girls are very excited because they're 18 now, Zali and Zara. So this is their first Vision Gala.
Right.
And so it cost me a lot of money because I have to pay for 5 people to go to Vision Gala this year. But they're so excited. But they're not just going, they're on mission. And so they got to roll. You're going to welcome everybody. You're going to greet them. You're going to give them a glass of champagne. You're going to make sure that you have an adult interaction with them. And they're excited because they're like, Dad, of course, we do that anyway. Yeah. But it's just their heart for the house comes from because we're doing this as a family. Yeah. The earliest memories are sacrificing and stepping and seeing it every step of the way. It's not because we tucked them off into a babysitting room and we, just kept all the church stuff away from them. Every year we've shown them the check we're writing to Vision. Right. And for years it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Dad, you know what we could do with that money? I'm like, exactly, we could build the kingdom. Yeah. And so for them, it's like ingrained in their DNA. So they come in with expectation. Last year, they all gave significantly for them, comparatively. And it was a great party this year when they fulfilled their vision pledge, where we see what God did. Amen. And so for me, it is, and even like, I was invested. I knew nothing about water polo, by the way, before my daughter started playing water polo. I had no idea. Yeah. But boy, did I get invested?
You're a water polo dad. I see you on Instagram.
Yeah. I'm a WOPO dad.
Yeah. Oh, WOPO.
That's cool. Okay. Water polo. And so nice. I was running up and down the sidelines. I nearly got kicked out of a water polo thing. I definitely got told off by the referee. Parents, please be quiet. That was me. But now they're into F1, the girls, and it's interesting you said that because they're dialed into F1 and. We just do stuff together. Yeah. But I think it comes from not putting them secondary, putting them primary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, the best model for it isn't even prioritizing. We've kind of put Jesus at the center of everything. And we've built our life around the church and around serving Jesus. And it's like we integrate that into everything. Yeah. And so it feels like definitely in our household, when I hear stories of like, dad's not having time or preparing a sermon instead of throwing the ball, I don't see how you can be that busy with a sermon to not spend time. Right. Like, they're your sermon. Right. That is your sermon.
Yeah, I think this is really important. The way I've always thought about it, I don't have like kids yet. We have just my wife now. Future.
I can see them doing digital coins though.
yeah. Maybe one day I gotta get them interested in that. But I think this is such an important thing to hear you guys talk about this because for a lot of people out there that are building businesses, that becomes the singular focus and everything else, like you said, becomes a distraction, but it shouldn't be that way. And I think of it as like a boat that you're rowing. Yes. And if your whole family is rowing together, you can go somewhere and you can go somewhere together.
Totally.
And it's so cool because that's what I always felt like vision was like, and like
Yes.
this idea of being able to participate in the vision.
Yes.
If you're not rowing with the church, you know, you kind of can get left behind, but you can also kind of also hinder the church a little bit. God will always do what God's going to do.
God's going to do what he's going to do.
But if you're going to be a part of the church, if you're going to be a part of this, that's why the vision and being a part of it
Yes.
and participating is so important, because you're rowing together, and the church is a family, right?
The whole church is rowing.
The whole
and that's
church
what vision
has-
is.
yeah, that's-
Let's all pull the
yeah,
oar. Let's
yeah.
all move together.
Yeah.
You know,
And would we be here had Noah not successfully
right.
gathered his family on the boat?
Right, right, exactly.
Right.
And I think that, you know, okay, just real quick, growing up, and the reason I say your kids are your sermon, because we've all heard a sermon that has no substance. It's like someone recited something that they didn't really have a conviction in. For me, I've seen generations where it was like, hey, they preach a sermon, but their family was jacked up.
Incongruent with what they
Yeah,
preached.
and it felt
right?
like, there's no substance to your sermon.
Right.
I can't preach something I'm not living. And so for me, I'm not going to preach on family and priority if that's not my first ministry. So before I get up there and preach a sermon, I better be living the sermon. And I think that's where, that's whether you're in business, you've got to have substance to your life. And the substance comes from what you're building around your life. Rowing together and growing together. What is the use of getting somewhere and people not being there with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the use of building a church or a business and then your kids aren't into it? And you go, man, I'd go forfeit it all for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen.
And so for us, it's not just getting there, it's how we get there.
Right. And I think the biggest lie that I've always heard is that I'm doing this for my family. And you're like, oh, I'm sacrificing everything for them. That's why I have to like.
It's an illusion.
Myself. It's the biggest lie you tell yourself.
It's an illusion. Yeah.
Click is one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you guys have seen that with
Which
Adam.
one?
Click with Adam Sandler.
I haven't seen that one.
Such a good movie.
A
You
new
guys
one?
should-
New movie?
No,
Have
no,
you seen
very
it?
old movie.
Okay.
Very, very old movie.
Okay.
It's this idea of Adam. I don't want to ruin the movie, but he has this remote that
Yeah.
essentially allows him to fast forward through what he considers the boring parts of his life, which is essentially his family time. And then he gets to the place that he wants to get, you know, successful in business and all that. And he looks back and he missed all that
the
time with his
key
family.
parts.
Yeah. And so he tries to he wants to go back, but you can never go back, right? You can never reclaim
Oh, you
all
can only
that.
fast forward.
You can only fast forward, right? And so it's a really good movie.
So
but
it's a sad movie.
It's a very sad movie. Oh,
Yeah.
absolute tearjerker.
I can't remember who it was, but it seems like I heard someone say, true success is getting to the end of your life and really being loved by those you want to love you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I like that.
and I just think
Yep.
doesn't
That's
matter.
important.
Success and church, business, life. At the end of the day, you're sitting around a table, and who does it matter most to, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to be there when you're sick? Who's going to be there at your funeral?
I think we get, you know, we believe the lie that the accolades are the moments, you know, the applause. But to be applauded by people you don't even know their name means nothing as much as a hug from your daughter who says, "Dad, I love you."
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like from one love you from someone who you know
Yeah.
Right.
compared to 1,000 people you don't know. It doesn't even match.
And a love you from somebody that's seen the journey.
Yes.
That's important.
Exactly.
Not a love you
Well,
from somebody that's seen the accolade. That's
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
They've seen you in your bad days. They've seen
They've
you in
seen-
your underwear.
yeah.
They've seen you
Yep.
right when you're
Yep.
broke, and they've seen you when you're at
Yeah.
the bottom.
Yeah.
And they do love you.
They've gone on the journey. Yeah.
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 Family's everything.
Family is everything.
Amen.
Well,
How was Schultz?
Shills is good.
Yeah.
She's waiting for her bar results. I don't know. She hates that I keep telling everybody this. Because
Oh, no, I'm waiting.
Now it's just pressure on her, but it's like,
Yeah.
the pressure's on God.
What'd I miss?
Yeah.
What'd I miss?
This is God's job now. She took the test. Now God's working. Whoever's correcting the
Pressure's
test.
on God.
Pressure's on, that's what we got to do, right? The pressure's on God.
I love that.
But yeah,
Love it.
we're really excited to have you on the podcast, Johannes.
Yes.
Thank you
Oh, it's
for
been an
coming
honor.
on.
Thanks for
Yeah.
It's a
joining
great
us.
conversation.
I feel like we've been a little bit everywhere and disjointed in some of our.
That's the
That's
hype
the pod.
pod.
That's the hype pod.
That's classic hype pod.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
those are the most successful podcasts.
Yeah. Just
That's what
open
people wanna hear.
conversations. Yeah.
We have no plan.
Yeah, there is a plan, but yeah, there's also no plan.
There is
at
a
all.
plan.
There was somewhere
Oh,
on
on that fancy little flip pad here.
my phablet, guys. We're gonna make it a thing.
Phablet.
We're gonna make
Phablet.
it a thing. Well, thank you guys for listening. If you haven't, please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode. Cheers,
Let's
guys.
go.
Thank you.